Hey there, and welcome to Comedians on Technology, People, and Drugs. I'm your host, Sam Joseph, and today we're very lucky to have comedian Luisa Wolky with us. Hey, Luisa, it's really great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Great stuff. Now, you're a very funny person, and I think, our teeming listeners, of which, there's at least six, are absolutely desperate to know, um, what your comedy origin story was. I mean, was it that you were sort of a duck that was bitten by a vampire and became like comedically funny, but only around other ducks and only at nighttime? How did it all kick off?
Wow, yeah. That's an interesting origin story. It's similar to mine, I would say. I'm still kind of surprised every time I tell this story.
Hmm.
So a lot of things actually needed to happen in exactly the right sequence for me to get into stand-up comedy. Like I was never a person who thought they would do that. And then I got hugely into the stand-up of Sam Campbell.
Hmm.
And I went to see his comedy show, and it was like a weird joint auction and comedy show at the same time. And my flatmates and we had just bought 10, or like rather one of my flatmates had bought 10 chairs at an auction that we didn't need. So we went to this other auction, this comedy auction, and brought the chairs. And then because that's an insane thing to bring to a comedy gig, they called one of us on stage to talk about the chairs, and that happened to be me. And then I said something like very mildly funny, and the audience loved me, and I was like, "Whoa."
Woo! Amazing.
Yeah, like that didn't even like do it. I didn't I would have never that wouldn't have like made me do stand-up comedy, but after that gig at the bar, I randomly ran into one of the comedians who was on stage, Dan Rath,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he said something very nice about like how I acted on stage, and I was like, oh, and he asked me if I was a stand-up comedian, and I was like, oh. And even that wouldn't have made me do stand-up comedy. I think I was just that changed my perspective a little bit of like, oh, he thinks I could do it. That's crazy.
Right, right.
Um, yeah, but then because I had booked these tickets for this comedy show, I had randomly seen on the Bill Murray, so that this comedy venue's website, that they have a comedy course. And
Mm.
one week, it was Monday, I had quit my job. I was, not doing anything. I remembered this comedy course. It was 9 a.m. at the time. I looked up this comedy course. It started that same Monday at 10 a.m. And I was like, okay, am I gonna like sit around this week, or am I gonna take this comedy course? So of course I went there for 10 a.m. and there was one spot left, and I took that last spot, and then the rest is history. Yeah, it's slightly crazy to me that everything really happened in exactly the right sequence.
It's almost as if it was destined to happen. That's a remarkable series of coincidences. Yeah.
Yeah, if I was in any way inclined to like the spiritual, that this would definitely make me believe in fate. But I unfortunately I'm not. I was really the wrong person for this to happen to.
Oh no, oh no. But it's Sam Kendall. He's the Australian comedian who's now based in London.
Yeah,
That right? Yes, I think I just saw him
he is
on
based.
yeah last one laughing right, and then but that was you were was that in London that you saw him for this show? Is that right?
Yeah, he's based in London. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Very, very cool. And then so you then did the course at was that right? And that was sort of a week long intensive course doing it like 9 to 5, well 10 to 5 or whatever, Monday to Friday.
Exactly.
Yeah, with presumably a showcase at the end of it. Is that right?
Yeah, and that also really like got me hooked for sure. And my
Cool.
flatmates, who of course had come to the comedy auction with me, also came to the showcase, and they kept on telling me how like odd they found my performance, which really pleased me.
Ah, brilliant, brilliant. Yes, yes, and so yeah, and you were saying yeah, you so there was a little flicker of like you were up on the comedy auction and you enjoyed that the audience reacted positively to you, and then the showcase gig, your friend said odd and you like that. D Were you? I guess the two things which I'm often asking at this point is about the emotion sort of before and after those first gigs. I mean, I'm also interested. Did you have a background of performance? What was that time on stage in the comedy auction? Was that the first time that you'd ever been in front of a large audience?
Yeah, it's I have no background in performance whatsoever. The job I quit was in AI regulation. Like there was nothing sort of artsy or performative about it. And yeah, I have like stage fright and I that was definitely one of the reasons why I couldn't see myself doing stand-up comedy. And then at this comedy auction when they called me up, I was like scared shitless. And I
Mm.
didn't basically like in the lights are in your face and you're basically not even registering what's happening. You can't even hear the laugh because you're just so scared.
Mm.
That was what it was like. But then the release after of coming off stage and it had gone well and people were like patting me on the back and that was like so like dopamine, endorphins, everything. That's like the best feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, oh well, absolutely. It's what many people I know and myself I think are addicted to, at least based on our behavior. It seems like we're addicted. And then you did the showcase show, and that's a different kettle of fish in as much as, that on the comedy auction that was sort of in the moment, you didn't have to prepare any material. It was da da da. Then you spent the week preparing, and what were your feelings like going into the show? Was that like you had to steel yourself, or now you were feeling, well, I know I've performed with Sam Kendall, so I don't have a problem here.
Yeah, no, Sam Campbell. Yeah, basically, I went in thinking like I've shared the stage with Sam Campbell. I can do this. No, not at all. I was terrified again. I think I was probably the most terrified out of all of us. We were like 12 or so of us who took the course, and I remember at the gig it was like 12 acts
Yeah.
because we were 12 people, and I was on in like somewhere around the middle, and like the entire first half, I couldn't hear a word anyone on stage was saying. I was just sort of rehearsing in my head and thinking like, fuck, like I don't know this line, or like this line
Mm.
isn't funny. Like just keep on sort of repeating those lines and then going like, oh God, none of this is funny. And I didn't know at the time whether I would go on stage and would absolutely bomb. I genuinely didn't know. And like now that I've done it a few times, I know like the chance of bombing is there, but it's not that, it's not 100% at least. And then I didn't know.
Right, right. And then I mean, oh, I love the you sharing that the inner feelings of the first half of the show, and then you went on stage, and I guess it went well, and you felt amazing afterwards. Can you describe in any more detail, how that first
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that you asked me to just bask a little bit in this this
Ah.
amazing emotion. Yeah, it was very much like huge relief because I didn't know it would go well, and then it did. And it was also because my friends were there, so I knew that there was a risk of like embarrassing myself in front of my friends. But then actually I'd done something quite impressive and like sort of out of the ordinary in front of my friends, and they were like, they were there for the plot, they were there for the sort of lore that was being created that night. And it was a really nice feeling. And also just like seeing everyone else who went on after me when I could finally like listen to what other people were saying, and just seeing how all of us had come so far in 1 week. Like I
Mm,
sound like I'm like advertising this course and like being paid royalties or
mm.
something, but and I should be because I keep on telling people to take this course. It was a really amazing experience. But yeah, I think everyone really did like so well for like being basic from zero to yeah, in 1 week going on stage.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I guess I think you said already, like coming off, you were elated and you were hooked. And so how did it go from there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a common story, right? Like everyone says this, but the showcase is always so friendly because, like, if you do a comedy course, because it's all of you, everyone's friends and family, and they want you to succeed and they like you. And there's an understanding that it's your first gig. And then after that, it's a little bit tougher. I was lucky that I didn't bomb in the first, like, 3 times or so that I did it because otherwise I would have probably quit. But I did eventually. I booked this gig. I was new. I had no idea. I knew nothing. And I booked this one gig that people actually pay to see, and it's usually a very small audience. It's called the Comedy Cabin. And it's real people. It's not like your friends, not your bringer. And yeah, I bombed really horribly. And my material also at the time included like playfully insulting the audience. I had no ability to like steer around this, or I had no other material I could redirect to. So I just did it, and it was horrifying. And then like that, I think that even might have made me quit, but for the fact that after I went on at the bar, I met some of the other comedians, and they were so supportive, and they were like, this happens, and like keep going, and it's yeah, they were really nice about it. But like looking an audience member in the face who has like looked at me with dead silence for the past 3 minutes and then like insulting them, that's like, I mean, gosh.
Rock and roll, rock and roll. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, well, it's interesting you say like the common story. Well, the common story absolutely is that the showcase show often goes well, and that not everybody, interestingly, is immediately hooked. Like some people are like, oh, that was fine, and they then don't do it again for 6 months or a year or what have you, and it takes some further chance encounter before people, really get into it, which I think is interesting. I was certainly hooked immediately after the showcase, and it sounds like you were. And yeah, so and then what's your and then for some reason I'm very interested, and I ask all people at this point, what's your kind of gigging frequency like at the moment? How are you approaching like from trying it out for the first time and doing a few gigs? What's your practice at the moment in terms of getting on stage?
Yeah, so I try to do 2 a week. And I find it very impressive that some people do like multiple a night, and it probably makes you better really quickly. But I have no idea how they do it. Like, how do you find time to write? And yeah, and I think to me also, it's a constant sort of management of um how I feel about the stand-up and how excited I am about it. And it's really important for me to book gigs where that aren't too difficult too, so that I don't sort of make myself accidentally put myself off and then quit. So it's definitely like yeah, 2 a week is sort of what I've settled on so far.
Yes, yes. I mean, and I think that was sort of my pattern towards the start. Um, yeah, and I think,
How many do you do now?
well, it now it's a little bit I mean, until recently it had been, and I've been sort of cheating by doing virtual reality gigs, but it would sort of be 5 a week, and potentially if I was doing a festival, then I might do 7 in a row, and I might
Wow.
double up on some of those nights. Although the doubling up is interesting because there's you can potentially if you know the people at the gig and you can work out the locations, you can kind of potentially arrange to go on first at one gig and then get to another gig and go on later. And I don't think I've ever managed 3 in London. Um, but I think there's also, you are getting the stage time, but at the same time, you're maybe not like, I think there's something, it's an interesting one about if you're just there, like, so let's say you're going on first, you first and you go, right? You then are not involved in, let's say, even if you stayed for the first half, any of the kind of evolving aspect of the audience, like how the audience reacted to each different comedian. So, like, I will, like one thing I'll regularly do cuts comedy or quintessential, and I'll close their first half for them. And unlike some people, they all kind of go on first and go. Um, I quite like being there and seeing how the audience reacts to each of the comedians, and then doing and then doing my work in that context. And some people might say, well, that's a bit of a waste of time if you could just go on first and just get that stage time. But I think there's other things to be learned there. People say, well, you should stay the whole show. I mean, I've got a demanding job that needs me to get up early in the morning, so it's kind of difficult to justify staying for the second half. Yeah,
Yeah, do you find that you actually change how you are on stage or what you say depending on how like the audience evolves in the first half?
I don't know how consciously I will do that, but I very much like to be there and hearing, and I like to have heard, okay, these are the names of the people in the audience that the MC has spoken to, and what's the yeah, like okay, what was the banter that was had, and then other comedians in that first half might have like interacted with them further. And so I'd like to have all of those things loaded up in the background of my mind. Whether I'll use them or not is another matter. Um, yeah, and usually on stage, I'm not doing things that. I mean, I do a lot of randomly different things. It was actually at Sunset on Friday, and I was emceeing, and like I was sort of trying out. I thought, oh, I'll do this, new set that I'm doing at the top of my the MC, opening the show, and I just thought, actually, they're not really going for it, and I cut it short. So, there's an extent to which I will adjust things in real time on stage, but I think I'm just getting to the cusp of where that's really practical. I think, unless you're some sort of genius, savant, like it takes quite a lot of time before you've got enough material that you can just go into immediately, that you could then just like, okay, they're not really liking this direction. I'm going to pull a different set of material than what I had originally planned.
Yeah, yeah. I find it really impressive when people are like going on stage and they don't have a set list written out and they just sort of pull from their repertoire and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, okay. There is some work for me still to do there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I'm not quite there yet. I've got now, some jokes that I can just put, I've done them enough times and so on, that they're just there and ready if I need them to go. I was going to say what was that? I was going to say one other thing, but actually, in terms of doing multiple things a night, because I'm, taking a show to Edinburgh and I'm doing Edinburgh previews, I've now discovered, in fact, if I book an Edinburgh preview, I can do 45 minutes on stage on a Thursday evening, and rather than running around to like three different gigs to try and get that amount of stage time, I can actually with my own audience, do 45 minutes. I mean, again, of course, it's a different skill to, going into a room of people who are not necessarily interested in seeing you or your show, and like whatever the setup is, saying, right, I'm going to give you 5 or 10 that's going to make you, really, really, really enjoy it. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the strange thing about the what we do is that the sort of getting the stage time and getting quality stage time is a real trick.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Well, let's get further into the comedy jungle by moving on to our second question, which is about how technology is affecting your life and comedy. And well, I guess I realized I didn't quite finish, partly because the previous section. What a professional podcaster I am. As I say, I was doing the virtual reality comedy, and that was allowing me to do, a couple of extra gigs a week where I didn't have to travel for them, but that's run down. And I've switched over to now. I've mentioned to you before that the other comedy game show podcast that I'm now doing, and so that's one night a week. And so, but and then I'm doing ed preview. So it's flipped around. I'm not doing quite as many gigs a week, but I'm doing longer amounts of time actually doing performance stuff. But that's enough about me. I mean, as much as the audience is desperate, all six of them want to know so much about me. They can, DM me.
I actually really want to dig into the VR thing. I don't know if you've already explained this on your podcast maybe 100 times, but like, what does doing a gig on VR look like?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's because it very much dovetails into the next question, and I have talked about it in some sense, but not necessarily in a huge amount of detail. Why don't we before much as I love talking about myself, let's hear about technology and how that's affecting your life and your comedy. And as I often say at this point, technology can be pencil and paper. It can be like a memory mnemonic. It can be like the latest AI model or using Instagram or what have you, videos, anything. But they're all tools that we can use, and I'm really interested about how the tools of technology affect your life and your comedy and your comedic process. Like, how are you coming up with joke ideas? How are you trying them out on stage? And is technology involved in that, or not at all? You like working with stone tablets? Who knows? But yeah, over to you first, and then we can come back to the virtual reality.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I'm a huge fan of technology. I studied computer science and I'm quite like I call my laptop my baby and stuff. But I also so I as I mentioned briefly, I worked in regulating AI and like I have a very sort of I like very difficult relationship with AI because I became interested in sort of the issues and societal risks and stuff like that of AI in 2019 and like
Mm.
studied computer science with the intention of trying to like help with the problem. But yeah, AI has really taken off since then and everyone uses it and it's like hard not to use it, but you don't want to give these companies your money. And Yeah, so but I think I want to for a second just like I feel like what sometimes gets lost is like if you put aside the issues for a second, isn't it absolutely great and insane and wonderful that humans have managed to like create thinking machines? Like that's insane. Like if you just think about like we were just running a few and I know you work in technology too, so maybe you know all of this. But maybe for our six listeners, like isn't it crazy that you can run a few math formulas back and forth and it creates a thinking thing? Like that is just insane to me. And I really love this like sort of insanity that of technology that we just use in our everyday lives. Just thinking about it makes me happy and sort of optimistic about humanity. But yeah, in a more practical sense, AI has a lot of issues. But yeah, how does it affect my comedy? I don't want to like go into the big questions too much, so I have time to talk about the little comedy things a little bit. Um, yeah, so I guess actually technology might be more of a distraction for me comedically than a help because I'm one of those people I'm gonna sound so boring here, but I'm one of those people who loves making spreadsheets.
Hmm.
And I will like or and uh some listeners may know this, but like m being a comedian is like so much admin. And like I will get distracted. Most comedians hate the admin, and I'm very lucky in that I get distracted by doing admin because I find it very satisfying. And
Mm.
I'll make my little spreadsheets, and there's a software called Airtable that's just beautifully designed, and I go crazy over ni nicely designed software and sort of yeah. Let me not get into that because that opens very boring floodgates.
And it, I
Um,
mean, go on.
but yeah, I think so. Yeah, maybe technology is a bit of a distraction for me comedically.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, fantastic points. I mean, one on the creating thinking machines. I think it is. I mean, I did my PhD in artificial intelligence. Like before it was cool,
Wow.
or there was any jobs.
Yeah.
Really, like I did that. That was like is going on 30 years ago, and so I didn't think, and I've been following, AI for 30 years. I wasn't sure that we would see anything like this in my lifetime. And it's kind of popped up, and it is amazing. I guess I'm also amazed by its flaws as well. I mean, it's sort of it's a really strange thing that there's an aspect of it of like stuff that we were just like, well, no, computers just can't do that. That's just they're just not capable of kind of doing this sort of like free answering of questions, and like handling your spelling mistakes and this that and the other. That I think is remarkably amazing. I think what's shocking is because we're so used to computers being precisely correct, right? They needed to, they seemed like the children of autistic savants of like they had to be everything has to be just no, the comma has to be the semicolon has to be in exactly the right place or I'm not going to do anything, so we're so used to
This
them.
every computer scientist felt what you just said in their bones.
Right, right. And but then so now we've got these. I mean, it's interesting that you call them thinking machines. We've got these systems which are now like, I don't care if you put a semicolon or you leave it out. I'm just, you can mistype that word, even get the word wrong. I'm going to kind of do this kind of like general sense. And so that is extraordinary. The flip side though is that then these systems are now no longer precise. So they make mistakes. They are in some, and they will sort of cover up those mistakes sometimes. They are strangely human, and that is kind of bizarre because I think that the AI that we were expecting, if it came, that it would come with that like ability to be flexible, but we didn't think it was going to make those mistakes. And so it is we live in remarkable times, absolutely. And but then and I, I mean, as I mentioned on the podcast before, I mean, I spent many of the last, even before the big, like, I've been doing comedy seriously for like 5 years, coming up for 5 years, and through the same period, I've been trying to get computers to be funny, and I was trying to do it before, the new AI models, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, no, they just can't do humor at all. I think that's slowly changing, but it's kind of, it's tricky. You certainly can't get reliable comedy out of these AI systems in the same way that you can't reliably replace a human worker yet. But I don't doubt that that may come in time. But you mentioned also comedy admin. Yeah, I mean, I it's interesting. Like we've had no, I've gone Gareth Beavis. That's right, on the podcast, and he loves his spreadsheets. He's like, oh, he loves it. He loves it. I think you're right. The majority of comedians probably don't like the admin. I have a lot of spreadsheets for more for managing the gigs that I run, and it's nice to have them under control. But I certainly, like you were saying, like it can be a distraction. Like I think sometimes maybe I would be a better comedian if I could devote more time to just focus on the writing and the performing, and I somehow was able to exclude everything else. Although, as you're saying, like the admin to an extent supports actually finding the places to perform. And by running your own gig, you kind of like tip the scale towards being able to perform. Although maybe that's the wrong direction. But yes, but so I don't. Please feel free to respond to any aspect of anything I said there, or to drag us on further into how the comedy creation process goes for you, and if technology is involved or not.
Yeah. Oh, you said so many interesting things there. Yeah, so I maybe gotta stop myself from going too much into all the AI chat because I mean it is what I spent like sort of the last 6 years thinking about.
Yeah, and we can
And
totally we can totally talk about AI. This is it's a technology podcast. We can totally talk about AI if you want to, but if you also want to restrain yourself, that's also fine too.
yeah, so I think one thing I wanted to say is sort of a bit of um, more of sort of nerding out about how AI works and how I think it's quite fascinating is that a lot of the sort of weird behaviors of AI, I mean, you know this, but for our six listeners who may all have comp sci PhDs for all I know,
Who knows?
I'm probably the least qualified person in this conversation. But the it's very fascinating. So the way that AI became a lot more useful in the past decade is via something called reinforcement learning from human feedback. And
Hmm.
basically, we had these models that were already capable of forming sentences and stuff, but they weren't like if you asked them a question, they weren't very helpful. They would just be sort of try to predict the next token, so they would maybe just sort of write like something on the internet, maybe written, because that's the training data, the stuff from the internet. But they wouldn't necessarily answer your question or do it in maybe they would even like sort of put all sorts of racial slurs or whatever. I use the stuff they read on the internet. And reinforcement learning from human feedback made it so that it was additionally trained on humans, sort of rating the answers as good or bad. And this leads to a whole range of interesting behaviors. It makes it a lot more useful because the AI now outputs things that, humans rated as useful. But it also, for example, the people who do the actual rating, they may not be able to spot factual inaccuracies because they're not there to like fact check anything. They're just like, oh, this sounds plausible and like super inside porny or whatever it is that makes people rate an answer highly. And this is how we get, deceptive behavior in AIs is that it is actually, rated highly by these humans who give the feedback. And yeah, sycophantic behavior of AIs that if you ask them, "Oh, are you telling me what you want to hear, what you think I want to hear?" The AI is going to go like, "No, but that's a great question, though.
Yeah.
You're a really good, you're a very self-aware person." And you're just like, "Yeah, I am." This is like this creeps me out so much, and like I mean everyone knows this, but AI is very sycophantic. So yeah, I think yeah, just wanted to nerd out about RLHF as it
Yeah,
is abbreviated a
yeah.
little
I
bit.
mean, it's a really interesting thing, and it does seem like the people involved in that and the way that's set up. That I mean, effectively, you are retraining the model to bias it in certain directions, and so things like fact, if it's like if people like positive, confident, sycophantic leaning responses, then that's the kind of thing that gets baked in to the model. And so yeah, it's a very strange world that we're living in when it's being pushed in those directions. By the way, I mean, do check out Composer 2.5 from Cursor, which is not sycophantic at all, and is really gets right down to the business, and is much cheaper than the other models. So yeah, and I think there's this process whereby now, as people are understand, I mean, it's still such a young technology, and I mean, the thing I keep thinking about is like using RLHF for the purpose of training a system to be funnier, because you could like with the right resources and the right, in particularly the large model, you could be like I wonder how reliably funny you could get a model if you were really training for that. Now, of course, being funny isn't a commodity in the same way that like being able to code is. And so, big companies are all focused on at the moment, sort of amongst other things, giving these things, reinforcing them to have great coding abilities. But yeah, I mean, if I was, independently wealthy now and had unlimited time, I'd be definitely doing RLHF for comedic purposes.
Well, that is good news for us that it's not happening on this commercial scale right now, isn't it? Because yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I don't see any reason in principle why it wouldn't be possible with a big enough data set
Right,
and
right, right.
people doing RLHF. Yeah.
Well, and in principle, people might say, "Oh no, we're taking comedians' jobs." I mean, existing world famous comedians employ other humans to be writers. I guess you could say like you don't like we might want those jobs to write for other comedians, but it's an extent to which rich people can afford to have a butler who looks through all their email or this, that, and the other. I mean, I guess in the ideal version of the world, basically there would be an equality, like everybody would get access to a kind of superhuman assistant that if that person wanted to, go on stage and write fantastic, they're like, oh, excuse me, I'm choking on my own AI bile there. What's going on? I think that some AI has noticed that I'm about to make them super intelligent and what have you. But no, I mean, I guess, of course, in the same way that the AI art might be dismissed as being soulless, I guess if you wanted to be a stand-up comedian and you had like an AI system write you this fantastic material, the fact that it wasn't necessarily coming from your heart or it wasn't stuff that you'd struggled over, maybe that would make it like useless, and you would be sort of a vacuous comedian if you weren't doing some of that work at the same time, you know like well I guess we would see, but it would often feel like I guess all these things. It's difficult. I'm busy. Like I'm thinking one thing and I'm turning it over the other way. I mean, one of the things I'm struck with my work at the moment, which involves a lot of coding, is actually using the AI for the coding. Seems like a boon, but then actually, if you use the AI to do all the coding, you start to lose the skill of coding yourself.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, it's
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 absolutely insane. I mean, so when I only finished university like a year ago. And I in university in my comp sci degree, I did, I coded like obviously.
yeah.
And then very recently I actually wanted to undertake a little side project like doing quantitative analysis on stand-up comedy sets, which
Oh,
I
cool.
I find is a very interesting idea, but
Very cool.
um not to go into that but yeah, I this was like several thousand lines of code, and I'm not exaggerating. I didn't write a single line.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was all AI.
You can
And
just ask
it's
the AI to do it.
so crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, Gareth Beavis also you should definitely check out his episode. He's really into the quantitative analysis, which for some listeners, if you haven't got that comp sci background, is basically about it's all the numbers. I think Gareth Beavis I can't speak. Gareth Beavis was all about, he's all about like, okay, I want data as data science. I want the number of people that were in the gig. I want the height of the room. I want how many laughs I got at which point and everything. And it sounds like you're into
Yeah,
something
oh,
similar.
I love this stuff. And I know it's absolutely a turn off for a lot of people, but yeah, this is just the way that I think my comp sci brain works is like when I got into stand-up comedy, I was like, okay, so where's the data about where's the data science about what actually
Mhm.
works? And like it
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Yeah, yeah. But well, then there's
Yeah,
other famous comedian, I think Olga Koch is she comes from a computer science background, and I don't know if
cool.
you know her, but I think she's of Russian extraction. But yeah, but let's dive into so the process for you coming up with ideas. I mean, the sort of the standard template these days is people are like, well, I just sort of like have an idea, I write it down on my phone, I maybe then like later on my laptop, I kind of like write it out a bit more. I try it on stage, it works, it doesn't work, and I maybe video myself, I watch it back, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Is that, I guess that's kind of like the vanilla thing that people do at the moment. Is that what you're doing? Is there some variation on how you try and get jokes up and alive?
Yeah, so I go to the park, I talk to the ducks. The ducks tell me some ideas. I go on a spaceship, I talk to the aliens. I unfortunately it's so boring. I do the thing where I go about my day and then if something funny happens, I write it down on my phone. And then I open my phone files later and sit down and try to write some of them out. And essentially exactly what you just said. Trying to come up with a more interesting way of saying it, but yeah, I think I do quite a lot of like um I do quite like to write out ideas properly before testing them on stage. I don't know if that's sort of more of a skill that maybe comes later of just like trying to improvise it on stage, but at this point I'm very much because I find when I have rehearsed an idea and I've read a line a few times or memorized it, then I lose the forest for the trees. I can't see it like the audience would anymore. I'm too close to the idea. So I find it a very crucial point of time for writing when I first come up with it. So like I need to
Ah.
like write it out properly first. Um, because yeah, it's sort of yeah, if I want to gain enough distance to see the joke as the audience will see it,
Mm.
after I've memorized it, then I basically need to like set it aside for 2 months. Yeah, so that's a big hurdle for me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that reminds me. I mean, I don't know that I have any kind of good structure there. It reminds me of when I was, I've written, not that it was ever published, but like not when I was in my 20s, I was writing a novel, and generally with writing, and I have subsequently published. I've got a book which is to do with like computer use and so on. Which you can get on Amazon. It's called "How to Interact with Humans After Spending a Lot of Time with Computers." But like what I would often find is that if I've written something and I've written a page of what have you or a chapter, that I would need to get distance from it in order to be able to like exactly as you're saying. You've got to sort of put it away for a month or two and then come back to it, and then you can maybe see some of the flaws in it or this that. So and it's really interesting that you mentioned that in the context of comedy because I mean I find the bigger danger for there's a bit of a danger for me is that I get bored of the same thing, and so like I've
Mm.
got my Edinburgh show, and well, I'm sorry, is it going off this way and that way, but when I was first starting out, I mean, I kept chopping and changing, and then I was like, oh well, I must try and stick to something. And I had like a 9 month period where I stuck to the same thing. I would practice exactly the same thing every day for 9 months. But by the end of it, I was just completely sick of it. I just didn't want to hear it again. And but now I have this 45-minute show that I do the whole way through. But I sort of like do it at festivals. But then I'm sort of I kind of carefully not do it for a bit and kind of like I have this kind of like space it out. I guess that hopefully it has the same advantage that you're describing that when I'm coming back to it, then I'm potentially seeing it a bit fresher. But I just almost like I've got to carefully ration the frequency with which I look at it so that I don't get too sick of it, so that I can perform it and I can feel good when I'm performing it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because depending on the bit, a lot of it hinges on emotion, and if you're not feeling the emotion anymore, then like how, yeah, it's Yeah, it's tough to repeat it a lot of times, I imagine.
Well, that it comes up. I think we've talked about it on this podcast, but I think it was originally mentioned on I think Pete Holmes' podcast. You Made It Weird, where he also speaks to other artists like uh, musicians, and the musicians have talked about, in order to do the performance correctly, you need to feel the emotion that you felt at the time. And it's funny because my show at the moment, I don't. I'm not sure what's going on with my emotions, really. I don't. Yeah, I mean, that just, it sounds so good. It's like, yes, like feel the original emotion, but I don't know. I mean, I'm on stage and I'm usually so like, oh God, I hope they're enjoying this. Are they enjoying it? I hope they're enjoying it. Oh, it sounded like they laughed a bit. Oh, they could be enjoying it. I'm not sure. There's like this whole, general ongoing anxiety of like, drowning out any other emotions that I might be experiencing. I don't know. It's very strange. Yeah, yeah. But then so
Yeah.
I'll give you, I was gonna feel free to respond to that, or I was gonna ask you about like the watching it, like having done all these things to get it on stage. What's the process that you use to like sort of like review afterwards and work out how to take things forward?
Yeah, God, that's a really tough one for me because the most useful thing to do is to watch it back and like go sort of, the delivery needs to change here, the line needs to change there, but I hate watching it back. And
Really?
I know you've talked about this on the podcast with with other people who also hate it. But yeah, I think I do a lot of um productive procrastinating when I should be like trying to edit stuff. I will just like write new stuff. And that's productive too. And maybe that allows me to, this is just me rationalizing it. Maybe that allows me to get some distance from the bit that I should edit, so that I can then see it like the audience would later on. But yeah, I haven't figured out the editing process at all.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I mean, you were talking before about sort of like moving towards, improvising on stage, and certainly that's something, I did. There's been a period where I've done quite a lot of emceeing, and I've tried to develop, and I did an emceeing course, and I've tried to, amplify that muscle, and the virtual reality stuff I was doing. I'd done over 300 episodes of comedy booby trap, where it's really all improvisation, and it's completely different each time. And I don't know if I'm getting any better at improvising, but I can certainly I can easily continue talking on topics that I've never spoken about before for 45 minutes. If that's a desirable skill, I'm not sure, but it's yeah, that certain people talk about, they write on stage. I Yeah, I would love to be doing that. I mean, I guess actually it does work out sometimes. I think, I got a new, so on Friday I was not very impressed with my MC performance at Sunset. I'd been very, very, I was exhausted. But then at the very end, I had an idea for a joke off the back of the headliner, and I got a big laugh of it, to close the show. And I sort of came up with that in the moment, and then yeah, like everybody's like, oh wow, that was great. You should definitely write that down. Do that again. We'll see. I mean, I may do it two or three more times, and then it doesn't work, and who knows. But like part of that was what I was saying before, actually, about rather than running from one gig to another gig, is actually listening to the other comedians, because that's a great source of ideas. Not stealing not taking their jokes verbatim, but they're talking about topics. And it's like, particularly for myself, I'm like, I don't really watch the news, and I'm not connected to sort of modern culture in many ways. I almost get my information about the zeitgeist through what the other comedians are saying, and then even like things that I would be doing in the virtual reality, and saying the things, and that's connecting me to people all around the world, in America or in other parts of Europe, and here, like, I would always be like saying stuff and then listening back to it. And sometimes it would have been, would not have got a laugh, but then I'm listening back to myself saying the things. And I'm like, oh, I could tag that here, or I could move that in this direction. That's like some of the things and I was sort of trying to do that on stage on Friday. And there was, yeah, some of the stuff that just didn't really get any laughs at all, which is like, but then actually, and I wish I could have thought of it in the moment, but then actually on the way home, I'm like, oh, I should have said that there. I should have said that there. And it's kind of like, it's I don't know. Yeah, you've got like I find if you can throw yourself into various failure positions, then you kind of sometimes if you're lucky you'll come up with it in the moment on stage. Other times you'll come up with it later, but then you can potentially reuse it. So it's if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so I don't know why m more people don't do this, more comedians don't do this, but I like to when I'm at an open mic and I'm staying for the whole thing, to have my notebook out.
Oh
And
yeah.
if, usually, if you actively listen instead of just absorbing the jokes will always sort of spark other ideas and like or like tags, and you're not going to be able to use them because it would be for them, but maybe you meet them at the bar after the gig and then you can tell them, hey, here's a tag for you. If you think that's funny, please say it. It would make me happy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No. Absolutely. Sorry, go on.
yeah, no, that's so I quite like to yeah, sit there with a notebook.
I do. I
And
do.
yeah,
I
often
do the same. Sorry, go on.
yeah, yeah. And often, and I also wanted to say, I think when you think of a line later, I've sort of oriented towards this experience when you're like, oh God, I should have said that at the moment. Actually, it's a positive thing. Like you're training the muscle to
Right.
think of it next time. Like it's better to think of it later than not at all, right? It's like a positive thing. Like,
Absolutely.
oh, next time maybe I will recognize this structure, and next time I will come up with the super quick retort or whatever.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. And I think that again, like you were saying, like if you're coming up with tags for other people, even though you can't use them because it's not your joke, you're still training a muscle there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've done that a few times with offering people tags. Obviously, I ask them first if they want the input. But no one's ever used it. Actually,
I don't.
someone, well, the patriarchy, we have to be careful of being perceived as a patriarchy. But
Oh yeah.
there was it was we just had him on Joke Wranglers, but Mew Mano, I had I think he's the first person I've given a tag who actually used the tag and he said that's working great, thank you. And I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. I
Oh,
probably shouldn't mention his name,
beautiful.
but yeah, no, it's just it was very pleasing because I hadn't even realized that he was using it, so that was a lovely that was absolutely lovely. Yes, right.
I
But
just
go
realized how lucky I am that I wasn't born a man because, like, honestly, I would be upholding the patriarchy so hard with all of my suggestions to people.
there you
Like,
go. Yeah.
I go up to people going like, "Oh, I would love if you would like change this," and it's like, you're not supposed to do that. You're, you
Yeah,
should
I can't do
definitely
that.
ask like you do.
I don't see gender, but if you're telling me you're female, then absolutely, you have carte blanche to totally do that. Yeah, well,
I
the
also like to man spread really hard when I'm sitting in the audience to
oh,
sort of
brilliant,
assert
wonderful,
dominance. Yeah.
like it. Well, look forward to having you in the audience for our next show. The
And always interrupting you too. It's really fun
you
right
know, I mean,
now.
this thing I talk continuously, so it's almost impossible not to interrupt me, and that's how people get a word in edgeways. It's interesting though. I like you. Going back to the editing thing is that I mean, I don't know if you've read Adam Bloom's book. That there's, I mean, there's all these different theories of comedy, and I don't know why, but I kind of grasp bits of them, and then I keep on like throw like it's weird like on Friday, in my my new material bits at sunset, I had like 13 things written down from my notebook, that things that I hadn't tested because I wasn't doing the virtual reality stuff anymore. And I was just like, right, guys, we're just going to go through these. And I'm also a little bit disappointed in myself in, oh, I was tired, but that, I basically was reading them out and doing a thing. They're just setups. I had not, I think if I'd had an easier week or what have you, I mean, I tried to force myself to actually like to write a punchline for each one, but at the same time, I kind of keep throwing myself into the mix. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot of other people would be like, they would be like, no, you must, you owe it to the audience to do more work before you take this on stage. But I'm part of me's like kind of like, no, I'm gonna in the moment, and then I think I sort of know, like in the moment, you should ideally what one is doing is you start on something because I know that other professional comedians who do this. They say I take an attitude and a point of view and a thing, and I go up on stage and like, but I think they've got what I haven't got is maybe a better understanding of like joke structure. Like that, I guess what it should be is like whatever you're doing, if you go into an analogy, you go into a surprise, if you flip it, you exaggerate it, there's like, a series of things that you do. But I often in the moment, I can't force myself to kind of take one of those strategies. Do you know what I mean? Like on stage, you might have a plan to do this, that, and the other, but I'm just, usually I'm just sort of like throwing myself heavily into a brick wall. Is what I end up doing. Anyway, that's
Oh
that's
yeah, that's what it can feel like for sure. And also I don't buy the you owe it to the audience kind of thing. And I recently I read a book called Comedy Book by Jesse David Fox.
oh
And
yeah,
he talks about a bit about how Chris Rock uses bombing intentionally, or at least used
really,
it in the past. And I thought, yeah, maybe I'd quickly explain what I mean,
please.
because I found it really sort of changed my perspective. Um, so essentially, what he would do is, because he wanted to test whether jokes were good on their own merits and not because everyone was laughing already and was having a good time and would laugh at anything, he would sort of yeah, break up the momentum and do things that sort of made him seem like an amateur, and like he didn't know what he was doing, and he's made it seem like he was nervous and like stuff like that. And then he told a joke and would just see whether that would get the audience back or not. And he would just not care. I guess he has a non-verbal learning something disorder, something like that, which means that he's sort of not that affected by sort of reactions he gets from other people, which just sounds really useful as a
Mm.
comedian. But yeah, so that's sort of changed my perspective, because it's like you don't owe the audience anything. I think if it's making you better, then eventually the
Mm.
audience will be paid back for this, right? Like if it's in service of improving your comedy, then it will eventually make people laugh harder. Um, and yeah, just like not dreading bombing, but like thinking of it as useful and maybe even a tool, I found quite
Yeah,
instructive.
that's interesting. I've heard aspects of that. I think about Chris Rock before. You've explained it in more detail, which is really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. In terms of owing the audience, I think if I'm in a show where the audience has not paid and they're effectively only paying with their time and they've been told that it's an open mic, new act, new material night, I think, yeah, one owes them less, although they're still paying with their time and attention. I mean, this is the ironic thing is that like I guess you have to ask the audience to pay it forward because like they may not be enjoying what's happening right now, but you can say like, well, okay, but your suffering there is supporting me doing better for a different audience at some point in the future. And I guess like if you're being paid for the gig or the audience have paid to get into the gig, I'd say some of those calculus start to change. But yeah, I totally take your point. And the thing I'd heard about Chris Rock was about him kind of, was it Chris Rock or was it some other similar comedian? But there was like they would do the joke and like kind of they do it like very deadpan. Whereas like they would but exactly that thing to kind of like say, okay, there's like to kind of get an accurate read on the joke, right? Exactly as you're saying.
Yeah,
If you're putting all of your energy and you're doing it, when the crowd's warmed up and what have you, like I guess it's this question of you want to kind of work out what's the fundamental quality of the underlying writing of the underlying concept,
yeah,
independently of any of the razzmatazz that you might put on it or the fact that the audience likes you or
yeah,
this, that, and the other. And that certainly makes a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah. I guess I'm tempted to move us on to our next question, although I can't help but help myself. Just mention a couple of facts about the virtual reality because you were so interested, which is the basically yeah
yes,
the I've been doing this. It's using the like Meta's headset. I forget the name of it now, but it was most of it done in Meta Horizon Worlds. And using this, I have like their is it Oculus Pro headset, which has cameras pointing at my face, so my facial expressions are mapped onto my avatar, which I've tried to make look as similar to me as possible. And basically, I think Meta has now they put a lot of money into develop, the headsets and the software and the supporting and everything, and I think it hasn't been a fantastic, huge commercial success for them, and they're kind of switching over to AI, and so the VR world is sort of withering a little bit, and that's partly like then the bar where I had been doing it regularly has sort of like ceased to exist as a running entity, and so I've sort of pulled back from it. But for hundreds of nights, I've had a mixed audience of between 4 and possibly 12 people from all around the world, and been able to unlike a Zoom gig where you're kind of like stuck in this flat, strange world and it's no funny. Particularly if you have all of the audience and they all have headsets on and they all have their audio open, then you can behave exactly as you would on a stage and lean in towards one person and talk to them and talk about what their avatar is wearing and do crowd work and like everybody else can see that you are looking at them and they're looking at you or they're not looking at you and they've walked away or all of these things and then if you manage to hit it right and get a funny, the laughter can ripple through the people, with like in the same way that it, almost like in a club, so it's a really I've really enjoyed having that as an alternative venue to perform in that doesn't take 2 hours to get there on the train.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I imagine it's a mixed audience of 12 fellow nerds, but
Well,
from
you
around the world, it's really
You
cool.
you say that. What's been remarkable about it is that the people I've met, like there've been like postmen and people who are like photographers, and I would say
Mm.
that the virtual reality, it like if you go back, that was a pursuit of ultra uber nerd game people. It was like the real extreme things. But I think what happened with with Meta making these like 300 £400 headsets is a lot of kids bought them for Christmas, right? In the same way they might get a PlayStation or what have you. And then a lot of adults, like the kid was bored of it after a 6 months or a year or what have you. And the adults are so there's a lot of like parents. I met a lot of people who are like disabled, different kinds of physical or mental disabilities who find it very difficult to get out to a comedy club. And then it's you might think it would be like a set of uber nerds, but it's been a remarkable. I've met people from all over Canada, America, Europe, or places that I've never been to, and I've only just about heard of, like Saskatchewan, which I can't even really say in Canada, and like North Carolina and all this that, and the other, and yeah, it's been extraordinary, and it's a shame that it's kind of like Meta's sort of a bit pulled the plug on it. I mean, it's still carrying on, but I've having done like over 300 of my comedy booby traps, I'm sort of switching to this comedy game show thing on Zoom with other comedians, which is just a time to try a different thing.
Yeah, no, that does sound really cool that it's yeah, for people who can't get out of the house, for example.
Yeah,
That sounds like a really cool. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, sorry, I'll get off the topic, but I think what's frustrating is I think that there is this amazing aspect to it, and it feels like Meta they've kind of gone with, oh, have a headset on and you'll watch a NBA game in like really high definition. And they've kind of like, in order to try and make it okay, like commercially successful, they've tried to sort of kind of connect it to existing, like brands or sports or this, that, and the other. And I think if they just gone, because the thing that it can do is it can really connect people, right? And I think if they'd gone all in on that and all in on supporting that, and maybe, I mean, what they really needed to do, I mean, which they're now doing with their silly glasses, is to have a subscription-based model where you had this really compelling community and you were paying. Like they were basically doing as a massive loss leader with the headsets, and the headsets are massively subsidized. And then almost the software as an afterthought, and the software did kind of like imprint, went from like this very, you didn't have legs, you were this like floating cartoon body. And over the course of 2, 3 years, despite many failed rollouts and whatever, ultimately you were fully human with legs and looking quite buff and all this, that, and the other. But it's lost its way. But let's I could talk about VR for a long time, but we won't. We will move on to the third question, which is like the people that have had the biggest impact on your life and comedy. And yeah, no, thank you for pointing out to me earlier on that it's not Sam Kendall, but Sam Campbell. Yes, the soup, I should remember. Obviously Sam Campbell had a big influence, but are there other people that you'd like to shout out from the comedy firmament, or your friends and family, or people on the open mic circuit who've had the biggest influence on your life and comedy?
Yeah, so I should definitely first of all shout out Dan Rath again because I think if after that one comedy auction show he hadn't said that to me, I wouldn't ever have gotten into comedy.
Brilliant.
Um, if I ever meet him again, I'll tell him for sure. I think the first stand-up comedian I actually really liked was James Acaster.
Oh
So
yeah.
I was still living in Germany at the time. So I
Mm.
lived in Germany until I moved to Edinburgh University. And I was sort of trying to learn English really hard because I knew I wanted to study in the UK. And actually, yeah, maybe going back even slightly earlier, I think I should say this is so random, but there's a sort of productivity YouTube guru called Ali Abdaal. And I found him through his productivity guru stuff. And he also did a podcast with his brother, and they were just it was called Not Overthinking, and they were
Mm.
just sort of like talking about whatever, and we're overthinking it, and we're very like analytical about it in like a way that they
Mhm.
felt that wasn't accepted by a lot of people in their lives, but they just wanted to like overanalyze stuff, and that really clicked with me. And I
Mm.
also felt that I didn't have that in my life, and that really filled sort of a need in my life. And they mentioned Would I Lie to You? And I watched Would I Lie to You on YouTube, and it contained James Acaster. And then I got super into, yeah, watching stand-up clips online. And stand-up comedy is not a big thing in Germany. So it wasn't really a format
Oh,
even
really?
that I was aware of.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it exists in Germany, and I think it's probably getting bigger in Germany now too. But I know I'm also like from the middle of nowhere in northeastern Germany, so there was no live comedy that I could have even gone and seen. Um, so that was my introduction to the genre, and yeah, hugely loved Repertoire, the four-part special of James Acaster that came out
Mm.
on Netflix. And yeah, loved what I now know. I didn't at the time analyze it at all, but what I now know is sort of persona comedy and like
Mm.
absurd and surreal stuff, and just like really got into that. So yeah, um, James Acaster was sort
Mm.
of my introduction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's amazing. And one story, I don't know how true it is. Apparently, like for the first 4 years, like nobody really got him, like his
Yeah,
thing.
I heard the same thing.
Right, right. And I mean, it's a great story for people who are for the first 4 years not being got like me. And now I'm into 4.5, and I'm like, okay, why don't I have a Netflix special? But yeah, it's yeah,
The number is ever increasing
yeah,
as
yeah.
comedians
There you go.
retell it. Who
That's right.
they
Five,
as you
six,
approach the
7.
fifth year, it becomes 5.5.
Absolutely. But yeah, I do love his whimsy, and then his sort of his personality is just yeah, extraordinary. There's something about the kind of like he's sort of almost slightly outraged, but like like he's being weird, but like no, I'm normal and you guys are strange. I think is yeah, love it, love it.
Yeah, I also think his persona is different in his specials since Repertoire.
Oh yeah.
The stuff I'm most sort of that's ingrained into my brain is Repertoire, and that's
Mhm.
very much, yeah.
Mhm.
It's he's awkward, and he's like super confident in like I'm the normal one, and yeah, it's
Mm.
glorious.
Brilliant. Yeah, and well, fantastic. And unless there's anybody else you want to shout out, we can move on to our fourth question, which is about how drugs affect your perception of reality. And of course, drugs, it sounds like, oh, we must mean those like cool, evil drugs or illegal drugs or whatever it is. But it's like, I mean, I'm using drugs to mean all substances. And so, of course, it's interesting because you say drugs and people assume illegal drugs, but you say drugs, it could be prescription drugs, or it could be, like sex is a drug, or life is a drug, or, we've talked to lots of different people about their different struggles with substances, be it alcohol or caffeine or, antidepressants or, I mean, even that, I say struggle there, like some people, like how much benefit they've got from, the right kind of antidepressants and how that's really helped them. But yeah, I'm interested in any and all substances that might be affecting how you live your life, how you perceive the world. As I must say, while you think over how much you want to share, don't share anything with us you don't want to. On this podcast, we do talk about these substances. Just because we had certain experiences with them or had certain positive or negative effects doesn't mean that you will. I just say to the listeners, all six of you, do be careful out there with what you're putting in your body. But yeah, so Louisa is. Are you having to put certain things in your body at certain times, or is your body a temple and you're pure as the driven snow? How does it all work for you?
Yeah, I gotta put in that heroin. No, I do like I yeah, no, do be careful out there. I do like experimenting with psychedelics. So yeah, let's talk about the cool stuff. No, I'm
Okay.
just kidding. But I think if you ask the question in the way that you formulated at the start, how it affects my perception of life and reality. I think psychedelics are like a very interesting thing. And I think the first time I did MDMA, it actually did change my perception of like not reality, but sort of how to be in the world, like how to
Hmm.
relate to other people. I think there's a very I think it's sort of related to the concept of ego death, but it wasn't a proper ego death. But like what I got from it was sort of, you know how if you do MDMA, you feel like a lot of love, you feel very connected to
Hmm.
everyone.
Hmm.
And this sort of per a sort of perception shift of like, oh, why do it's these things are so hard to like remember accurately, I feel, and
Hmm.
express. But a sort of insight of, oh, in everyday life, you do really not treat everyone's experience as importantly as your own experience. So
Mm.
if, for example, I'm hanging out with my friends and I want a tea, this is suddenly super important in my head, and I'm like, okay, I should go make a tea. But I'm never like obsessing over like if my friend wants a tea. Like that's not
Mm.
something that I need to care about. Unless of course they ask, in which case I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make you a tea.
Mm.
But like sort of there's a fundamental sort of importance to your own experience. Like it's
Hmm.
so all encompassing when you feel pain. It's the most important thing in the world in
Mm.
that moment for that
Hmm.
pain to stop. And
Right.
oh my God, I'm definitely like Joe Roganing all of this. Like this is
Go for it.
um
You go, girl.
yeah,
Woo.
um I think the sort of insight there was like in this moment I felt like everyone's experience was equally important to mine. And it's not something you can sort of make yourself feel in a sober state intentionally. Like maybe it will happen if you meditate a lot or something. But
Mm.
it's something that I found extremely fascinating. And yeah, I think I had and it's interesting. You need to put in the work after having such an experience to like not forget it, and to like if you make resolutions to actually keep them and that kind of stuff. And I haven't done that. But I did sort of I think make very positive resolutions after that experience to um, treat other people's experiences as equally, yeah, so equally important to mine. Again,
Mm.
it's hard to. It sounds inane, I think, when you say it like that.
Well, it's. I mean, I don't know if this helps or hinders. I mean, I spend a lot of time listening to Eckhart Tolle, who I believe is of German extraction originally, and he talks about, as other spiritual thinkers do, about is it Alan Watts who talks about that basically we're the universe playing hide and seek with itself. So there's this idea that there's actually only one consciousness, which is kind of like this sort of all-pervading sort of beingness of the universe. And we are kind of like elements of that reincarnated or incarnated into a particular form where our consciousness kind of derives from that. And but we don't, we are kind of like we've got this illusion of separateness. I mean, that's the same with the whole Zen Buddhist, idea that the separation is an illusion. And what you're describing there is saying everybody's experience is important as one another's. That matches, I think, the sort of some of these descriptions from the spiritual thinkers who are sort of saying that, the enlightenment is that process of waking up to realize that, we are all one consciousness. And I'm not saying whether that's true or not. I'm just reporting, what other people say. But I think there's that it's whether independently of any scientifically verifiable truth, it's an interesting way of looking at the world where instead of, you meet somebody and you look at them, well, this person wants that and I want this and we're in conflict. Whereas if you can kind of recognize like some shared trait between you, and that becomes much easier if it's like your own children or your own family, where you kind of you do have this, like it's interesting that you mentioned this. I mean, I don't know if you have kids. I have some, and they're desires and feeling and pain sometimes are even more intensely important to me than my own. Although it all gets a bit mixed up and is a bit confused. So um, I want to reassure you that what you're describing there, which is like this idea that everyone's experience is equally important, doesn't sound inane to me, and in fact, it matches
Mhm.
what a lot of very wise and thoughtful people have said. And probably the world would be, again, independently of this truth or falsehood of any of it, if we all kind of valued like all of our experiences, more equally, like basically to be, if we were all a bit less selfish, then probably everybody in the world would be having a lot more fun.
Yeah, and I don't even want to make like claims about which of these sort of fundamental philosophical ontologies are correct, but I do find it very interesting that just by ingesting a substance, you can sort of change which ones seem plausible to you,
Mm.
and like just challenge the sort of status quo of like, oh, I just happen to sort of believe in this ontology, and everything else seems to completely insane to me. Like if I like I don't know, read some spiritual texts, maybe that seems insane to me, because I'm a very sort of scientifically minded person. But it isn't it sort of doesn't it cast some sort of doubt on my ontology if just by meditating a bunch or ingesting MDMA, it sort of switches what seems plausible to me, isn't that? Yeah. So like living with this uncertainty is something that I tried to do. And I definitely find this sort of idea of everything being one consciousness very, very interesting. And this is sort of what I think ego death refers to, is sort of experiencing this as a fact that everyone is one consciousness. And it's weird. I never experienced ego death when doing substances, but I once had this very long train journey and I hadn't packed any entertainment. And my I was on the train with my dad. My dad had a book on humus, as in the soil, like good soil is called humus in German.
Okay.
I believe this translates to English, maybe.
Hmm.
So I was reading this book about soil for
Mm.
like basically 8 hours, and then I had an ego death.
Oh, wow.
And I think about that a lot. I don't extract any lessons from it, but it was
Mm.
definitely cool.
Yeah, well, that's really fascinating. And I think we're sliding into our final question, which is about what does it all mean, the life, the universe, and everything, and 42. Haha. Um, and this,
43.
okay, even better.
I think that was a off by one error, actually.
Ah, very good. Computer science joke there. Love it. Love it.
Oh God.
Fantastic. Ah. Um, and I often say at this point, it's like this doesn't have to be the bigger question. It could just be like, what does your life mean to you? But I am also interested in like what do we think is going on in the universe and this, that, and the other. But the way the conversation has gone, I think that's not you're not going to be intimidated by any of that. And I'm really interested in what you're talking about there with the ego death, which, also connects with a lot of the things that and again, when I use the spiritual term, I mean the a lot of stuff from kind of mindfulness and Buddhism and so on also talks about the ego death. And I've been struck by Eckhart Tolle and how he talks about effectively what was his ego death experience when he was 29. And there's a comedian called Paul Foot who is a very funny guy who is I think now in his 50s, and his last special from a couple of years ago talks about his ego death that he experienced driving around the motorway near Leeds. And what he describes in his comedy special is remarkably similar to what Eckhart Tolle describes, and both of them describe it not as "oh, I planned for this to happen," but it was something that happened to them. And I've got a book by Stephen Taylor, which lists people throughout history who seem to have had this weird ego death experience, or even some people even rarer who never seem to develop a full ego. Like they just as teenagers they kind of stayed in this non-ego state. And my ego is really larger than the known universe, and I want it to die. It doesn't want to die. It's an ongoing fight backwards and forwards. But I'm fascinated to hear more about your experience of ego death on that long train trip with that book on humus or soil, or was it terra solata? Who knows? But yeah, or what's your perception on? You talked about leaning sciencey. You're open to different things. What's going on here? Is this a strange? Is this a simulation that aliens are doing experiments on us? What do you think's going on, hey, Louisa?
Wow. I never thought that someone would want my opinion on these questions, but I am super happy to offer all of my very um deep insight. I mean, the ego death thing happened like ages ago. I must have been like 15 or something. So I don't remember it in a lot of detail, unfortunately. And it's never happened since. And I'm not a super spiritual, or like I'm sort of anti-spiritual, really. It was a little bit of a rebelling reaction I had to my father, who's a very spiritual person. So I haven't pursued the ego death in any way since then. And I think this what you refer to of like people consistently reporting the same experience with, for example, ego death, but also with things like meditating a lot and then reaching certain like states of consciousness, and it's like multiple people independently reporting the same thing, I think is like super interesting. But it doesn't fascinate me in a way where it's like a religious thing to me, or like I believe that this is necessarily like giving me
Hmm.
access to some sort of higher truth or something. I just find it very fascinating. Because I
Hmm.
mean, objectively, it's crazy and fascinating, right? I mean, if you're not fascinated by something like ego death, then like clearly you're scared of it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think one thing that I want to touch on in terms of my answer to life, the universe, and everything is how fundamentally important uncertainty is to my worldview. Like
Right.
I find um there's a concept called moral uncertainty in moral philosophy, where usually most people have a very strong sort of moral taste. They're like, oh, I believe in equality, for example, or other people are like, oh, I'm very strongly utilitarian, and like maybe these two worldviews collide. And it's like usually when these two people with two different moral tastes collide, they there's like nothing they can do to sort of resolve this. And uh I was very much a very strong utilitarian sort of intuitively. Um, before I came across moral uncertainty, which sort of says, oh, given that we're all super certain in our own view, I'm super paraphrasing here. There's also like a philosophical correct definition, but like, given that we're all so certain and we can't seem to make progress, and we've been trying to figure out what the correct moral philosophy is for the past 2000 plus years, maybe we should be uncertain. Maybe we should not all be like, oh, I'm correct and you're wrong. And from their perspective, it's exactly the inverse. Um, Maybe we should just be like, okay, it's maybe I have like 30% credence that utilitarianism is correct, and 30% credence that something like deontology is correct, and then like another whatever percent on everything else. That just goes to show how good my mental math is. I couldn't subtract 2 times 30 from 100.
Maybe there's a
You should
mathematical
not be.
uncertainty as well. It's
Yeah, right. Yeah, like no one knows what 100 minus 30 minus 30 really is. So yeah, phone it in if you have any ideas on how to solve this mathematical equation. But yeah, so the idea of uncertainty has been sort of really changing my mind on philosophical issues. Not that philosophy necessarily impacts how I behave in day-to-day life overly much, but I do think that uncertainty, not just moral, I think uncertainty in general has sort of crept into my life in other ways, not just moral philosophy, but like I think people also have this with like political views. Like there's an analogous thing where like let's just say people on the left and people on the right, they never seem to like be able to make any progress in their in their debates with each other. This is not true. I'm like overgeneralizing here. Of course, sometimes people do come closer and to each other and like make some actual intellectual progress. But like a lot of the time, instead of going, I confidently going, I'm right and you're wrong, maybe we should be going, okay, I'm uncertain.
yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, for me, and I think the word I use is tentative, and that was a word that I discovered in a biology textbook when I was 15, where it was describing the difference between scientific and religious truth. In that,
Hmm.
and I don't know if modern scientists all completely agree with this, but anything in science is tentative. Like we say, we think the universe was created with a big bang, but in principle, if and a lot of scientists, I think, agree that that's is what seems to be supported by the empirical data. But if we were to find a different explanation, that was supported, by the data that was supported better, in principle, any scientist would say, right, okay, I'm now going to change my mind. And the reality is, of course, as humans, people are, emotionally invested in one idea that they may have known for a long time or this and the other. But I think, at the base of science is the idea that these truths are tentative and they should be able to be overturned if we find a better model or you find other data or, you can't reproduce the experiment. And that to me, connects with that concept of uncertainty. Like, we don't know that evolution is necessarily the complete explanation of how complex life, we might find other evidence to a different thing. Whereas religious truth is absolute in that, for example, somebody who's Christian might say, well, Jesus is the Son of God. And that's not, I'm not open to, some new information coming around that tells me that in fact John is, the Son of God or something. And these, I have
Yeah,
sympathy.
actually, we've
Go on.
run some tests, and we think this guy from Tennessee, has a really good shot at being the Christ.
There you go. Well, and indeed, the stuff in Utah, the Mormon folks, they're still writing new bits of the Bible, and they feel like they're able to do that. And then different people, would say, well, no, that's not, it's only the people 2,000 years ago who were writing that things that they're the ones who were in
Yeah,
contact with
we
God.
should run some randomized control trials, see who actually converts some wine into water. No, the other way around.
There you go, there you go, or vice versa. I mean, yeah, because I can do that wine into water pretty quick, pretty easily myself. But yeah, but the absolute versus tentative. I mean, I got into discussions with people who, I mean, I'm not religious. I don't have an absolute belief system that says this. I think I'm much more in your camp, which is I think we should be uncertain of all things. I don't know that we can, I mean, the only thing that potentially we can be certain of is that we can be certain that we are conscious. Although even I start to doubt that sometimes. But
Oh yeah, there's illusionism. There's always you can't. Yeah,
yeah, it's but who knows? But yeah, definitely I lean towards it. But there are people.
this is me. This is me leaning into like if I was born a man, I would definitely be the one at the party going like, "So have you heard of illusionism?" Like
Okay.
this is a re yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to. I mean, we're gonna have to talk more about that. Although we are sort of running out of time. I was gonna just say, yeah, that there. I think there are religious people have made the point to me that they've accepted that you can approach the universe as tentative or you can approach it as absolute. They've made an argument to me to say actually they feel that approaching the universe with absolute and their life with absolutism that it's a different way of living in the world and that opens certain sorts of experiences and certain sorts of whatever to them. And I'm like, great, okay, that's if you want to go that way, please do. I find it to me it just sort of seems more reasonable to be tentative because I don't, but maybe that's just like I'm genetically inclined that way. But it's interesting. You sort of see yourself as anti-spiritual. Is that because you're in a very sort of pro-science kind of stance? It's like you feel that the spiritual things rely upon sort of fuzzy reasoning and like you say a lack of controlled experiments, and that's kind of like anathema to you, and you are very much like we should try and understand the world with a sensible scientific approach.
Yeah, I really want to be careful here not to like be too um scathing. How do you say too derisive? Is that a word?
Yep,
It's
you could say you mean
wow.
you don't
Yeah,
want
this
you don't want to say is that all these religious people are basically kind of like nuts. You're trying to avoid saying that that their whole approach is completely nonsensical and kind of like
yeah, so basically they're
middle
all
aged,
stupid idiots
and they
and
should join
they
the
have not
Enlightenment.
read Richard Dawkins and no, yeah, I think it's very much it's I think it's sort of a taste thing, isn't it? I find spirit like yeah, when I read spiritual texts or just like not even like the Bible or something, but just someone writing on Substack about their spiritual beliefs or whatever. I find it super unconvincing, I guess. I find it usually like poorly argued or like it's not even trying to make an argument.
No.
And it doesn't appeal to me in the way that seems to appeal to other people. And like because I don't understand why it appeals to other people, that
Mm.
probably means I should be uncertain. Like if I don't understand why it doesn't do the same thing to me, then I should probably not sort of reject it out of hand. But yeah, yeah, I think that's kind of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and does that then for you, like in terms of your worldview and like the meaning that you would put on life, are you like, well, everything's uncertain, so there isn't any meaning, or I want to be happy, or if you're
There,
like kind of putting all the your ego death and everything put it together, we should be increasing the sum of total human all species happiness, or what's the where does this landing on the uncertainty thing lead in terms of how you view the world?
yeah, man, you're really opening up like epistemological debates that are in my head right now. And I think so one fun thing is that I used to be quite nihilistic, as in like moral nihilism, like I believe nothing mattered.
Mm,
But actually, moral uncertainty made me think, okay, if in let's say I believe whatever percentage, even if 99.9% I believe that nothing matters, but 0.01% I believe that something matters. Sorry, I should have said 0.1%.
yeah,
But
well,
the other, yeah, again,
mathematical
clearly
uncertainty.
you
Yeah.
should be trusting all that comes out of this highly functioning brain. Um, Even if with like 0.1% chance I believe that something matters or some other view than moral nihilism is true, then basically I should be acting as though things do matter because the in the world where nothing matters, that doesn't give me any sort of action guiding principles. So it's, like the only action guiding thing is that 0.1%. So you can act as though things matter, even if you mostly believe that they probably don't. So that's sort of that's my out of moral
Okay.
nihilism. And I do sort of in terms of practically making decisions in my real life and like thinking about morality in much more practical terms as opposed to like these sort of abstract academic thoughts. I do quite a lot of deferring to other people's opinions, like people who I believe are really smart and have thought a lot about, like, for example, um, um, how bad are the risks of AI, for example? That's a very morally important question for the world, and like also really like career choices for me, for example, hinge on that. Like, should I be working on reducing risks from AI? Like, this is a very practical question to me. I really do a lot of thinking about like, okay, who are people who spent their entire career thinking about this question, who I believe are smart and have good opinions and are not lunatics, and then sort of trying to figure out, yeah, who to believe. I guess that's sort of an internal struggle for everyone, figuring out who to believe. Um, but yeah, I do. I think I do more of that consciously than other people. Yes.
Interesting stuff. Well, it's been a fantastic conversation. I think our six listeners are like besides themselves, jumping up and down, wanting to know where they can see more of your comedy, Louisa.
I think we lost them around like second two of me
Oh,
going
I
into
think
like
at
ego
least at
death.
least at least one of them is still half awake and like they'll be snoozing and they'll be dreaming, and this is a chance to implant the subconscious suggestions that will force them to come to your upcoming comedy shows. Where should people be looking for you?
So I write a Substack blog about stand-up comedy, and been really positively surprised by how other people also love to nerd out about stand-up comedy, and love to dissect it and love to like give each other tips and like share knowledge. And so that's been really fun. And if you want to read some nerd outs about comedy, then look me up on Substack. My name is Luise Wolky.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we'll get that link in the show notes. And well, thanks everyone. And remember, you can help support comedians with technology, people, and drugs by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and by following us on Spotify, where you can ask questions and add comments. We love hearing from you. And do follow us on Spotify. That helps us go up the rankings and get out to more than six listeners. And we do look forward to being in your ears again soon. Last word to our fantastic guest, Luise Wolky.
Always remember, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.